The Code to Cash podcast.
Pricing is not a billing problem. Pricing is a code problem. Pricing is a product.
Price point is really the last thing that actually even matters.
You need to have the most atomic unit of your product, not your product.
Hello and welcome to the Code to Cash podcast. I'm your host Ajit, and today we have Daniel Zarick, co-founder and CEO from Arrows. Welcome, Daniel. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Ajit. It was great to meet you and great to be here.
I really love any discussions with founders on the topic of pricing strategy, and monetization. But I actually love your product too. I was just on your website a little while back, and I noticed how easy and clean and crisp you've made this customer onboarding process. And I used to be on the customer service side back in the day myself. So I'm just curious to learn from you. What does your origin story look like? How does Arrows come to be?
It's funny, you and I were just talking about how we both worked at Twilio at different eras. So I was at Twilio early on, and one of the things I did there, I was a product manager, but I launched a couple new products like the short codes, the 5 or 6 digit phone numbers that for SMS. And I sold the first 100 of those that Twilio sold, and I had to onboard and operationalize those phone numbers. And there was a big collaboration there between the phone carriers, us at Twilio, setting up and configuring them, getting them approved by the phone carriers, and then working with the client and the customer to take the steps and do the actions they needed to do over the course of 6 or 12 weeks. It took a while to actually turn on, get approved, and then launch on that shortcode. And Arrows didn't come because of that experience, but it's funny to look in retrospect and go, what we're doing with this collaborative onboarding tool, actually something that I wish in the old life I'd had. I kind of saw these dots in retrospect, and I'm sure you've seen this in your career with focusing on pricing. Now you kind of go, oh yeah, I've always kind of been interested in this, and I didn't realize I was interested in this. So Arrows started because we were taking some of the things that I had built and done at Twilio and trying to turn them into products. So I focused a lot on internal tools and internal processes. I worked a lot in Monkey, if they still call it that, I assume, the internal admin tool. And, at Twilio, I was always interested in, my customer being fellow team members. Like I was serving an internal customer. And I always thought about it in the years after, where are there opportunities in the market for, team members or teams inside companies that have a direct line to, the profitability, the success of the business, but where internal resources, internal engineering and product resources just can't give them enough attention. So, for us, that was the operational side of the business. Success wasn't really a named team yet, but we had those sort of functions, finance, et cetera, et cetera. I built a fraud detection system there. So those were the things we were going oh, these are ideas that are compelling. They meaningfully affect the profitability or the success of the business or the cash flow, et cetera. But it's incredibly difficult to get engineering resources. So we started building in that world, and we found nobody really cared with the stuff we were building. But there were a couple teams that really liked our worldview, and they liked some of the ideas, even though they didn't want the specific products that we built. And they were mostly the customer success team. So we were oh, we really resonate with you all. Talk to us and just walk us through everything that you do day to day. Walk us through what happens when a new customer comes in the door. How do you find out that they exist? Does the salesperson message you on Slack? Do you get an alert in your CRM? Do you get an email? Do you get connected in a Slack channel? And then tell us everything that you do with them after that to make sure that they're happy, successful, profitable customers who stick around for a long time. And what we found were a bunch of Google Sheets, Trello boards, custom dashboards in their CRM, Google Docs, long email threads that were 30 emails long with a bunch of bullet points. And through that, talking to people, nobody's really satisfied with that. And what we started doing was designing an idea of a collaborative onboarding plan that looked sort of like a project management tool, but was designed specifically for this, multi-team collaboration. So my team with you as a customer, taking steps towards a shared outcome of implementation, successful rollout, et cetera. And as we started digging into that, we found that people were interested, but at the same time, it's still an early category. It's a new behavior, and I think we didn't totally appreciate that early on, how much of it was going to be a change for people. So I, in many ways, equate what Arrows was doing to, e-signature in the late aughts, where it's a new thing, a new behavior, and people were kind of like, why are you sending me a link? Is this legal? Can I sign this? I don't really know how this works. And then fast forward a few years, it's weird if you sent me a PDF to sign and I had to print it out and do a wet signature. But the behavior in the market changed. We think that that's starting to happen with our category. If I bought your product and your pricing services, and you sent me a spreadsheet that said, here's all the steps we're going to take over the next 3 months, more and more that's starting to feel outdated and old. And I'm going to judge you for the lack of customer experience that you're giving me, versus if you send me something like an Arrows plan or, one of the tools in our space. Over time, you're starting to see faster onboardings, happier customers, just a general better sense of the quality of service that we're getting. And we think that will accelerate over time as people realize this is an opportunity.
Interesting. This is fascinating for me because I know we're going to talk a little bit more on pricing and monetization, but as a young founder myself, I'm building something that rhymes similarly, right? It's not in your domain, but I'm curious, you have an hypothesis that you're going into the market with, and you're working with these customer success folks. I'm guessing you're facing a lot of rejection too. And what was your journey like when you started from the concept and idea at a high level to saying this is exactly what the feature set will be, and finding your, I guess, first cohort of happy customers who really wanted it? And how much time did it take? And I'm just curious what that journey was like for you.
Painful. That's what it was like. I almost think of it as we had 3 founding moments in a way. That's not maybe the best way to think of it, but we were using the name Arrows and the branding Arrows when we were doing the early, kind of experiments of different products. Then we had the second founder, and we said, actually, now we're building an onboarding tool. We did customer development and research, and we kind of found the opportunity for an onboarding tool, designed mock-ups, and then learned from people through, iterating on those mock-ups. And then what we did at that point was we asked for people to prepay, and we were really naive and only asked for $100 in the pricing context. We were like, looking back, I go, $100 is meaningless. I would spend $100 now on so many things at the company that effectively make me have little to no commitment to actually using it. Whereas, now actually what's harder to commit to as a company is our time and our focus. And so if something is a real big pain, I would actually ask people to commit time, in writing, yes, we will give you 2 calls per month or 3 calls per month, and our team will work with you to develop a solution to this very painful problem for us. And, the money is actually not that important. If it solves the problem, money will be no problem. And then we had this third founding later where we started focusing on the HubSpot ecosystem. And that was about 1.5 years ago. So we took the core idea of Arrows, the onboarding platform, the collaborative onboarding tool, but we shifted our perspective from being Arrows as its own platform that had integrations with CRMs to actually being very CRM centric in how we build things. So it has a very deep integration with CRMs, and today only HubSpot. And that was kind of the third founding. So we went through kind of 3 different stages, and I wish we had a way to get to that third founding sooner. I wish we knew how to do that. And actually, if I go back to that second founding and go, if we had actually approached the early customer design partner process maybe more effectively, we might have found that CRM centric model sooner.
Interesting.
So what I'm kind of getting at is we had these mock-ups, and we were talking to, customer success teams and SaaS companies and saying, hey, walk us through what you do with new customers or with onboarding. And then we learned a lot from them and showed them our mock-ups. It's eventually, we kind of thought of it a lot as, how do we escalate to the, at the end of each call, how do we escalate to the next level? Whether that's a referral to somebody, an introduction to their boss, or somebody that would give us more information, or eventually pay us money because you think that this is valuable. And, we wanted some level of commitment from them, social commitment. And I wish we had actually gone and said, actually, would you agree to work with us for 6 months? And we won't charge you anything, but we will effectively be a product development team that will build stuff for you until we find something that works and solves the problem for you. And the commitment for you needs to be time and attention. Yeah. And if we had done that, I think we would have had much more of a commitment around making sure we were learning from the individual users of the team, not just the manager who maybe gave us that $100. And I think we would have maybe better understood the exact ways that the onboarding tool fit into the day-to-day workflow of each person. Because that's the thing that we started thinking about a lot is, there's this book, The Mom Test, that's very good. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a phenomenal book. It's very helpful for helping folks do, customer development, customer research, making sure you're asking the right questions. But what we found, in our thinking was every kind of workload or every process that anybody's undergoing is like a series of pipes. They connect and they, flow through different workflows. And for us to build a new product, it had to fit into an input and an output in that existing process. So even if we're building something wholly new, it has to replace something that currently exists. If they're not actually doing an action or doing something, you can't replace it. So if, you can't sell a new pricing modeling system to a company that's never changed their pricing because they just don't care through their actions. We can't sell onboarding to people who don't actually have an onboarding process. And so what we found was, I think, or what we did poorly early on was we didn't actually embed ourselves deeply into truly really understanding how onboarding. We thought we were doing it, but we didn't truly get into the weeds of like how onboarding existed day to day in their process. We still imagined an idealized version, and we didn't deeply embed it into when this button is clicked over here or this email is sent over there. Now we want to trigger arrows fitting into the process. It was still like a separate tool in many ways.
Interesting.
And this third
That's
founding
very interesting.
in the HubSpot world is when we really, I think, started understanding where arrows fit in. And we narrowed more. We said, okay, how does arrows fit into a HubSpot, a company that uses HubSpot for sales?
I'm curious, like most companies use Salesforce as their CRM. So I'm curious why you made the selection for HubSpot.
Yeah. Well, so most is carrying a lot of weight there. I mean, I don't know the latest numbers, but for Salesforce, but they're in the hundreds of thousands of customers for sure. They're definitely a much larger average deal size than HubSpot. But HubSpot it's getting really close to 200,000 customers. I think they're in 190 something thousand. I don't know the latest, but they are a huge number of customers. Over 100,000 of those are Sales Hub users. So they use the CRM, the sales CRM, not just the marketing tool. And, when we looked around, we've made this bet. We had a Salesforce integration. We had a HubSpot integration, but they were, I like to call them data extractive. They pulled data out of those CRMs into arrows, but we did nothing to add value back to the CRM. When we made this change a year and a half ago, we said, well, this is a pretty big product change where we're going to be very deeply embedded in CRM. We need to pick one platform to make a bet on to see that this product change actually works. And honestly, it was a big argument internally. We weren't sure, Salesforce is bigger, but HubSpot might be easier. What does this look like? And so we did it first as like a product, through a product lens, basically saying, we use HubSpot. We're not planning to change off of or switch off of HubSpot. A lot of the companies we talk to today use HubSpot, and they actually buy faster because the HubSpot admin, the RevOps person, usually is more enabled. They're a little faster to implement. They're a little more enabled to purchase things. Salesforce admins it's a lot harder to implement. It's a little slower to implement. It's more complicated. The purchase is more complicated. We would have had to build more enterprise level features faster. So ultimately we looked at it and said, from a platform standpoint, this makes it easier for us to make the choice. But once we got into it, we realized that, when you look around, a lot of startups like us are using HubSpot as their platform and scaling on it further and possibly forever. So we kind of look and go, over the next decade, until 2030 and beyond, HubSpot's going to be the dominant platform for high growth companies, in our opinion. And Salesforce isn't going anywhere. It's still going to be massive, but HubSpot's growing fast. And there's an opportunity to be a leader in HubSpot in a way that there's not an opportunity right now to get meaningful growth in Salesforce, but it's still going to be there. So if we leverage our success and growth from HubSpot, we can jump to Salesforce later with more momentum and more strength rather than right now trying to climb up a wall that's too tall.
Interesting. So are you finding that companies, are you finding this has changed your sales cycles, so more people are able to find you more organically?
To a degree. I mean, in many ways, it limits our possible market, because you have to be running sales or running post-sales processes in HubSpot.
On HubSpot. Yes.
But what we've done, and we've tried to make a point to do, is if you are doing that and you're a RevOps person in HubSpot, or you're a customer onboarding team, customer success team that runs some processes in HubSpot, we want you to see arrows and go, yes, that's the obvious tool for me. So we try to, by being more narrow in our audience, become the more obvious option. And we do believe that's true. There's obviously we have competitors that still get HubSpot customers, so we still have room to go. But we do think more often than not, we are becoming like a default recommended option in the HubSpot world for customer onboarding.
Understood. Makes sense. All right. Now we move to the more curious about your excitement around pricing, right? So
we
tell me about
code, and now we go to cash.
Yes, and code and market, right? And I mean, even when I advocate, I say pricing is downstream of your market decision and go to market and segmentation. So I'm curious, what was your journey from $100 to where you are? And I was on your website and I saw that there are a couple of plans, and then there's an enterprise plan. I'm curious the dynamics between those as well. Like, how are you able to get price discrimination was kind of my first question, but we'd love to go into it.
Maybe I'll go through the history a bit. So we started with $100, like I mentioned, on the first customers that we just asked them to pay up front. Then I think we kind of stuck with $100 as like an ongoing monthly price. And we stuck there. And then that was when Arrows was its own platform. We didn't even have the CRM integrations. It was just an onboarding product. And I think in there we had some, maybe we had 100, 250, 500, and it was based on your team size. Then at some point, we had some people that were earlier startups, smaller teams that said, this feels too expensive. Like, I'd rather pay something like $50 or $39. So we launched a $39 plan. And there's still a couple customers who are on this $39 plan. And to some degree, that could work. You look around at the market and you go, all right, what do we compare to? Like, what do we fit? What are we next to? Is this more like a form tool? Or is this more like a CRM? Like a CRM is charged per seat, and a sales CRM is charging $50, $100 per seat, like some meaningful number of dollars per seat. And then if you look at like form tools, some of them are, especially indie tools, there's an earlier price point that's like $19, $40, something like that. And for a long time, we kind of started looking at pricing as a function of, well, how many folks are showing up? How many trials are we getting? How many people are even in market for this sort of tool? And then eventually like looking at it and going, well, what's the business impact? Are we going to find enough of these customers? And do we have enough value that we're adding to their business to actually hit our goals? And we looked around, and a lot of the earlier startups, the people who had, who were signing up for Arrows early on they were feeling pain around our price. Like even $100 felt a lot for them. $250 felt a lot for a lot of them. But it was because they actually had a more fundamental problem, which was they were like, oh, we have an onboarding problem. And we go, no, actually, you have a product problem. You think this is expensive because you don't have real customers who are paying you real money. And so this actually, the pain here isn't big enough for us to solve it for you. And you're not willing to apply humans in a way that if Arrows is expensive, then you're not actually expending, human time on this. So as we evolved over time, we started finding ourselves wanting a higher price point to weed out. The higher price point would weed out the startups or the companies that were too early or naive in their processes to actually need something more expensive. And so today, you mentioned our pricing, we start at $300 per month. And that's actually just to have some entry point for companies that like are curious or don't yet have a huge pain. But we start there. And actually our sweet spot is the 750, 500, 750 plans. Those are people who are doing a meaningful number of onboardings per month. but also they have a reasonable pain there. They go, well, if I'm, have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 onboarding people, this cost means like very little to me, because if I dramatically improve their efficiency or the number of customers we're onboarding, or if I onboard customers in half the time, the impact to my business and our profitability goes up dramatically. So what we found is actually like increasing our price over time, and the starting price point actually forced us to find the ideal customers who actually had a real pain to solve.
Interesting.
And then it made us downstream figure out like, well, what features need to happen that actually make them, for that sale to happen. And so in there's a change too that I kind of glossed over, is we switched from a kind of a seat-based or a human-based price lever to a usage-based price lever. And so we never really we might have at one point for a very small period of time had like a per seat price point, but we always had, plans that had some like kind of growing value metrics. So for a while it was how many team members you have, up to 5 team members or up to 10 team members, and you would jump to different price points. The reason we did that is we wanted to have a floor. So if we, we wanted the floor $250, let's say, well, that means you have a minimum of 5 team members, something like that. At some point, we realized that like, well, what is it that we're selling with Arrows? We're actually selling onboarding efficiency. We're selling the ability for you to scale further. So if that's true, if you have 10 onboarding people that are onboarding 100 customers a month, and you want to grow to 200 customers a month, we don't want to be incentivized by you growing your onboarding headcount. We want to be incentivized by you onboarding more customers more efficiently. And that's when we had the light bulb moment of, we've said for a long time, we're in the business of creating happy customers because we're helping you onboard and create happy customers. And if that's true, we want our pricing model to be aligned with that. Even though it might be counterintuitive to some people that show up, it's easy for us in the sales process to say, look, you don't want to double your onboarding team. That's expensive, but you do want to double your customer base. Arrows can align our pricing with that lever. And, that way, when they're hiring less people, we get to charge them more. And they say, this feels acceptable. We're still winning in this deal. And so that's kind of where we've oriented now, is there's still plans, but those plans grow by the number of onboardings you do per month. And the reason we've avoided a flat usage, kind of Twilio style, is people vary each month, and the variability of their onboardings kind of creates anxiety, and they want to have certainty around what they're going to pay.
So you have closer to, I would say, something like a 2-part tariff or a 3-part tariff model, right?
We kind of think of it as a matrix. If there's starter, pro, and enterprise. So starter has the basic features, the pro has more automation and reporting features, and then enterprise has custom objects and some enterprise level security type things. And that allows us to then, you asked about pricing discrimination. We've thought a lot about, what is my willingness to pay, and how do we fit people into tiers that map to their willingness to pay? And so one willingness to pay is, how many onboardings am I doing per month? Well, if I'm onboarding 5 customers per month, I have a certain, price point for each customer. It is very different than if I'm onboarding 50 of those same customers per month, or 100 of those same customers. But within that, different businesses have different price points or different complexities of an onboarding process. So there's like a horizontal axis there where you go, well, I actually have a higher willingness to pay for 5 onboardings if I have a, $2,000 a month product versus a $20,000 a month product. And how do we then look at what features that those different onboardings need, or the components of that business? So somebody who's selling to an enterprise client, they might do fewer onboardings, but they need Arrow's enterprise features. And somebody who's selling to a smaller price point customer, they can be on startup and do 5 onboardings, and that's
completely. I really like your website design where you have like these packages, and on top you have your metrics, so that you choose how much, the packages is the fit, right? You want a 3 series, 5 series, 7 series BMW, and then how much are you going to drive this car? Something like that, right?
Yeah, that's very funny. Yeah. No, because I think that's the thing we thought about in the pricing a lot, is what's the number, off the top of your head that you know pretty certain if you're looking at our pricing, you go, I know we're onboarding about 20 customers a month. That's how many new ones we add. Okay, I can click this button. I know now I can see the pricing. And then I'm in a mode where I can compare across all 3 plans to know which one I need. And actually on our sales calls, we actually, people ask about pricing and we just take them right to the public website. And that's been a huge lever for us is, we used to keep pricing hidden, but only because we were playing with it, not because we wanted to hide it. And then once we got to a point where we felt good about it, we made it public. And that pricing being public has been very helpful for people feeling confident that they know what it is, they know what they're getting. When we show it to them on a sales call, they go, okay, got it. And then we have levers in there that we can play with based on any hesitation they might have or things like that.
So I'm curious about the enterprise plan too. So you have an enterprise plan.
Yeah.
Often, there's a lot of things that go along with it. There's comparison shopping. People compare the price points to the features. If the willingness to pay is too high, and if you have the lower plans showing up, it can be a little bit challenging to just make a customer pay. I'm just curious what your experience is with this enterprise plan.
Yeah, for us, it gives us the we call it enterprise, but in so many ways it's just custom, right? And I think that's always a challenge. Do you call enterprise, or do you call it custom? Really, we find it coming into play when people have unique needs, like we need SSO, we need custom object support. We have questions around this integration. Can you do X, Y, or Z? Or actually, sometimes what happens is people have a mix of different types of onboarding. So we have enterprise onboardings that need this, and we have kind of lower value onboardings that need this. And so if you calculate how many onboardings you're doing on each of the other plans, you can kind of come to a dollar amount per onboarding. For people in the enterprise, sometimes it's, we have a mix of different ones where that price point would be acceptable or not acceptable. And so what we have in the background is kind of a couple different levers to pull. So we have a platform fee that we often introduce that is just kind of inherently built into the price point of the other plans. But on the enterprise level, we go, okay, depending on what your need and your requirements, whether that's custom contract stuff, single sign-on, the size of your team, the size of your HubSpot installation, et cetera, we find a platform fee that makes sense, and we kind of have a floor for that. And then, we can tweak contract terms because we give you a higher platform fee. Then there's always the lever of the number of onboardings you plan to do. So we typically on the enterprise tier are selling an annual commitment. And that's when we say, okay, well, how many onboardings are you going to do per month? What are you expecting to grow into? Oh, you're going to do 1,000 the next year. And then based on the features and the type of onboarding, their price point, it's a bunch of things. We kind of can triangulate into, here's the price per onboarding. So you're going to do 1,000 onboardings and they're $20 per onboarding or something. The levers they go below and above that.
Makes
and that
sense.
way we kind of come to then an annual contract and go, okay, here's an annual contract that you can buy into. And let's say you go slightly above that, that's fine. If you go slightly below, we'll work with you next year to maybe roll some over.
Understood. Now that you have changed, so, seems like the major decision was to change the pricing metric from per user to per onboarding. How are you tracking analytics on how these packages are performing? How often do you like to make some tweaks to the pricing going forward?
Yeah, we definitely, so there's two usage being the broader term. There's two kind of things we look at. One, which plans are we selling more?
Yeah.
Everybody's purchasing through talking to us. So, nobody's really buying without talking to a human, but we track, what's the distribution of plans. And then within that, we definitely track the usage. Are people, utilizing the plans, the onboarding plans that they are basically purchasing? And, it's a constant goal for us to make sure that people are actually utilizing what they're paying for. So if they're paying $750 a month and they're getting 25 onboarding plans, sometimes they're okay if they're only using 5 because they might only be purchasing 5 and it's of that value. But we want to at least know what their expectations were and then track and make sure through our own onboarding process they're utilizing that.
Makes sense.
But for us, we, in terms of the growth of the business, that pro level and that enterprise level are where we focus. The starter level is really, look, we want you to use this if it's something that's interesting and that you need, but we're hoping that you grow your usage or you grow in your needs. So, okay, I started in the starter tier, that's $300, but now in my day-to-day usage, I'm realizing some more automation would be nice. So now that I'm realizing and I built trust with this tool, I'll grow to the 750 plan. And we found that expansion mechanism to be both horizontal and vertical axes to be very strong for us.
Makes sense.
Going forward, though, in terms of tweaking, it's a tough question because I think in many ways we're generally happy with it, and we're starting to think, maybe the pricing structure overall is correct, but how do we increase our deal size? And so we have a few levers there. We go, oh, well, we can grow into higher headcount or larger teams that are, onboarding more people. We can make the pro tier and the enterprise tier more valuable through building out more valuable product. We have a bunch of different levers in there, and we're kind of pulling on all of them in some ways at the same time. I think we generally are feeling, we kind of debate, is the $300 tier something we even want to support? Is that something we can do well? Do we want to make $500 our entry point? And I think right now you'll see us keep the general price points around the same, and then just look for ways to increase the what's in each package. But you might also see us bump them a tiny bit and make the current price points the annual price, and then we kind of increase the monthly price. So we're kind of looking at different ways to have little bumps in there. Yeah,
makes sense. I was just working with the company that had the same dilemma about their entry level. It's sort of nice to have, but it's not the highest monetizing, and it's not even maybe
service them.
Yeah, exactly. It's not even like the ICP. It's below the ICP. So same debate was happening. I think we may be going for just completely ad hoc, like per unit of measure plan there, pay as you go. But we'll see. So we did like a whole series of customer interviews for that.
One thing I could see working for us, and you just made me think this, but I wouldn't be surprised if our team liked it, is, on the lowest one or two tiers, making it annual only. Like you see that sometimes in consumer products, right? In an iPhone app. Oh, you can buy it for $3, but it needs to be an annual commitment, so it's $30. And you go, okay, like that's worth it to us if you commit. And if you're willing to commit at an annual point, then we go, like we can service you and we can make sure you're successful, and we reasonably expect you'll expand over time. But to some degree, we'd love to play with free, but at the same time, there's not a lot of people in our category that need something like Arrows today who aren't willing to pay for it. And so actually having something like free is a problem. And so what we do with free right now is you can sign up and play with Arrows for free. You just can't send onboardings to real customers. So we almost look at free sign up as a implementation. If you want to go through implementation on your own, you can play around to get comfortable with Arrows for free. But if you want to go through a handheld implementation, you want to roll it out, you want to commit and start sending them to customers, then it's time to pay.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, those were most of my questions, Daniel. Any other topic you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I mean, one thing that was on my mind is, again, back to the levers of what helps somebody in a sales process feel confident and comfortable to purchase. And so with a few things that we think about that we've built up as, I think, strengths of ours is we want to have very few levers that people can pull on, that, we're not getting into a net new, discount scenario every time somebody says, we want to be able to say confidently to a new customer that, like, you're not going to find some discount somewhere that, that like an ongoing forever 30% discount or something. Because usually, what people feel is some anxiety that they're getting the raw end of the deal. Like they actually feel really good about our pricing if they're signing up for it and it's adding real value. What they're worried about is, well, I want to be on the $750 plan, but, we're scaling up our onboarding process over the next 3 months. I don't want to pay too much until we're at scale. And we go, oh, great. You have anxiety around the onboarding process that first 2 or 3 months. How about we give you a 3-month discount at 30%? or 50% or something
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
helps you scale your usage in that period. And that generally makes people go, oh, good, I'm getting something, but I understand that like I'm buying into the full value of this and I feel comfortable with that, but this lets me reduce my anxiety. Or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we'll give somebody a month free for a case study
Mm-hmm.
and go, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
like a simple trade. And we go, that's a policy. So I think what
Yeah.
we found that it feels really good for us is having policies around discounting.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
And that helps a lot. And then on the flip side, being a little rigid on not discounting for things that are just because it feels good. You know, these are the 2 or 3 levers we can give you. We can give you an onboarding discount, or we can give you like a case study discount.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Appreciate the time. This was a fun conversation, and always like I think I enjoyed the pricing discussion, but I also maybe as a founder enjoyed the product market fit discussion even more, because that's, you know, you have a working product when you're doing pricing, but you almost, you know, fighting for survival when you're trying to make sure that the product sticks. So congrats on the success, and appreciate.
I think it's interesting. It's always a tough balance between, well, when you're early on changing pricing, how much is pricing a function of the market or the ICP or the product today or an ideal, you know, I've found it very fun early on, but also very painful. And it's actually, I found it way more fun now to think about pricing when you have something that's working and you know who your ideal customer is, because you go,
totally. You
have more confidence.
You built the engine and now you're optimizing the engine.
Yeah. And that's always kind of fun. You're like tuning the engine.
Yeah, totally.
I'm excited for you, man. I think you're going to get there pretty quickly. I mean, having the pricing tool is such a strength for people. And I'm excited for this podcast because it's something I think people don't have a lot of language around what options even exist for, you know, how to play with pricing or how to tweak it or even how to think through it. So this is a great podcast.
Totally. Thank you so much for the time, Daniel. It was great to have you on.
Yeah, definitely.